hello. Welcome back. It is week 95 on Out on That Line. I'm Geoff with my co-host Alex. As always, Alex, how you doing this week?
It's easy to grin when your ship comes in and you've got the stock market beat. But the man who can smile is the man who's worthwhile because his shorts aren't too tight in the seat.
Is that from Cocktail?
That's from Caddyshack.
Oh, that sounded like one of the things that Tom Cruise would say when he was pouring a drink.
Rubbin' sun is raisin.
Oh, that's a fantastic movie. That whole run.
Oh,
Fantastic.
my God. Days of Thunder, Cocktail, Top Gun. He was Risky Business.
Phenomenal.
He was unstoppable.
Jerry Maguire. People forget. Right at the tail end of all those. People forget.
Jerry Maguire was a movie people had a real boner for when it came out, and now you don't hear anything about it.
But it's a good movie.
It is a good movie.
Yeah.
It's like a classic, well-made movie before we were like, you know what everybody just wants now? Marvel movies.
Yeah, it's like a movie. It's one of those things where it's like you go to the movie to see it. You know, you go to the theater to see that. It's got kind of movie, you know.
It's an experience. Yes, I miss that.
So we have a big album this week, at least for me. This is, and I think, you know, given our friendship history, this was a pretty important one. And I think snuck under the radar a little bit. We didn't really talk about it much leading up to it. But it's Death Cab for Cutie and the new album, Asphalt Meadows. So we're going to get to that a little bit later. But first, something big happened since we last spoke, Alex. I was able to meet Tim Showalter from Strand of Oaks. So I'm not going to say where I work. I don't want people, you know, knowing his shopping habits, but he came into the place that I work at, and I recognized him when he came in immediately, and he was someone else's customer. So I just kind of left it alone. I was like, I'll get him on the way out. And so he was on his way out, and I'd been talking to my coworkers and said, you know, that guy is, you know, lead singer of one of my favorite bands. And they were asking me about him. I was like, yeah, he's just really, really good. Actually played him couple of his songs, and all these old guys were like, yeah, he sounds pretty good. And on his way out, one of the guys was just like, hey, we have a fan here. And so I just went up and introduced myself to him and just told him I love his music, I think like 5 times in a row. And I'm sure it was plenty awkward for him because he was just trying to do his shopping. But, you know, it was really cool. He was a really nice guy. He actually stayed and chatted with me for like a minute or two, and it was just a really, really cool experience.
Nice. Did he seem like enthusiastic and stuff like that?
Yes. It nice. Seems like I follow him on social media and stuff, so I feel like he was very much like that in real life too. Just seemed like a very positive person.
Did you get really nervous walking up to him?
No, not really. I just kind of like turned it off. I was like, just do it. Afterward was when the shakes set in. I was like, oh my God. That's when I started having like the moment.
The adrenaline rush afterwards.
Yeah.
That is exactly what happened to me when you and the boys and I were in San Antonio and we saw famous brick shit house wrestler Mark Henry. And I marched my little rabbit ass right up to him and stuck my hand out for a handshake. And then in a total panic move, did the Bill Clintonian clap on the shoulder while you're shaking the hand, and he reared back like he was about to punch me in the fucking face. I think his shoulder might have been hurt, and then I whacked him. I touched him with too many hands. You get one hand. You can't be putting two on.
You get one.
Too intimate.
Everybody knows that.
Everybody
knows that.
He almost gave me the world's strongest slam through a table.
That dude was huge.
Oh my God. Terrifying.
Huge. I can't believe people are built to be that size and that athletic at the same time.
Unbelievable. I mean, the powerlifting records this motherfucker set. He legitimately, I'm like, that's one of my favorite wrestlers. I can't not go talk to Mark Henry.
Yeah. And I mean, sexual chocolate, baby.
Oh, yeah.
Who could ever forget when he admitted, was it Mae Young?
Yes.
That they were having a kid, right?
And it turned out to be a like prosthetic hand. Some weird shit WWF was doing in the 90s.
That was, what a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive. Oh my God. Almost got inducted into the Hall of Pain by Mark Henry.
There was no holds barred back then.
Literally.
All right, and moving on to the album. So let's talk about Death Cab for Cutie and Asphalt Meadows. So we've each done our usual, is we pick 3 songs each. But this week, I think, is the first time that we've ever had it where it's totally blocked, like 3 songs are together as one person's picks, and then the next 3 are the next person's picks. Like, it's always been mixed up a little bit. I think this is the first time that we each have 3 in a row.
And I think we're bookendy too. Like, you didn't do the first song, but you did the 3 after that, and I didn't do the last song, but I did the 3 before that, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah, interesting stuff. That Ben Gibbard, a very, very clever man. So, the first song that I chose is going to be Roman Candles. And this was one of the, this is the second song on the album, I believe. This is one of the, like, kind of leading singles, I think was the, let's see, May 4th. And then officially released on, give me a second, May 11th. So it's been out a few months, several months actually at this point. And this was the one, I think I did this one on the YouTube channel. I think I did either this one or the Here to Forever. I think it was Here to Forever actually. But what I liked about this song is it just was, it had enough of the classic Death Cab, and I felt like it kind of was representative of the whole album. Like, you heard enough of that, you know, we have the facts and we're voting yes, and like the photo album, you know, you have enough of that era of Death Cab in here, but then it mixes with the newer stuff, the post, like Codes and Keys and Narrow Stairs version of Death Cab. And I feel like it was a very good mix. And I really like this song because it represented some familiarity as well as branching into some new territory instead of like just throwing you into that immediately.
It's very similar to our album from last week, Mountain Goats, in that regard, because it really is a return to form for the band, for Death Cab, and it adds like a new dimension on top of it. And I will say that especially with this song, that kind of sleigh bells-esque, like fuzz, snow crash, distortion sound that they layer on sometimes, I'm like, that's such an aging indie guy move. It's like, we can't just keep dipping back into the bag. What do we got to do? I don't know. Fucking crazy distortion over the top.
Yeah, it's he definitely represents the aging indie guy.
Yeah. I mean,
perfectly.
The youngest guy in the band is what, 45 at this point?
Yeah, they've been around a long time. I mean, that's the thing about Death Cab, is they've been around since like before I was even in high school. You know, I found out about them and they were already, what, 5 albums in?
Yeah, when did Transatlanticism come out? 2003?
Yeah, got to be something like that.
That fucking album's going to be 20 years old soon.
Yeah, what a classic.
That's unreal.
Classic.
That's unreal. And that really did kind of set like an emo-esque indie standard for our age group, for our little pocket of millennialism.
Yes.
So in that sense, it was cool to hear Death Cab kind of go back to its roots on this. So I hate that I led with a criticism. But if I can do like a backhanded compliment, I'm really fucking sick of pandemic musings. I have been for a while. And every now and then, just out of nowhere, we get whacked. Like, Mountain Goats, at least, was like, well, it was born out of the pandemic, but had nothing to do with it. It was inspired by movies that were watched during the pandemic, but didn't have anything to do with the pandemic itself. So Roman Candles, the first time I listened to it, I'm like, oh, fuck. Oh, no. But then you're like, well, you got to keep the faith in Ben Gibbard because he's got such a singular talent for exploring like the tiniest moments in these like little images. So like right off the top, it's been a battle just to wake and greet the day. Then they all disappear like sugar in my coffee. A hint of sweetness, but the bitterness remains, the acidity devouring my body. That is not trying to put too much flowery prose on it. It's perfect imagery. It's classic Death Cab. You know?
Yes, and that's the thing that I really like. And I think of songs like Passenger Seat and, you know, just the older ones that really got those, like you said, very specific moments just perfectly represented in song. And it, to me, this kind of reminded me of that because it feels like it's such a simple setting that you're able to put yourself there quickly and easily. So you may not be like the same, you know, he doesn't talk about the color room and all that kind of stuff, but it's like, so you imagine what you need to put yourself there. He allows you to do that very well and always has. And I think that's kind of what I like about Death Cab is I like it to feel like I'm going along with the artist on whatever emotional journey that they're trying to go on. And I think Death Cab more than anybody in my lifetime kind of does that for you. Like Plans was a absolute landmark album. We did a whole episode on it on this show because it was that good. And I think for me that it was starting there, but then kind of going back from there and then keeping up with the new stuff as it came out, I really latched on to Death Cab. And these sounds, like this album, had so much of that sound that I loved, and the reason I fell in love with it in the first place that, you know, I'm going to, like, spoiler alert, I'm going to like this one a whole lot as we talk about it. One thing I really appreciate about Roman Candles and then moving into the song Asphalt Meadows is they did try to do some sort of, you know, pay attention to what kind of might be appealing pop wise and like pop music wise. And I think that was a smart move because they're kind of at their best when things are catchy. You know, they definitely did their time where getting very weird lyrically, you know, time signature wise. They've done their like progressive things before, but their best stuff is like their cover of This Charming Man is incredible. You know, when they're just like bopping along, or the Sound of Settling. I mean, when that's like Death Cab for me at their best. And I feel like we got a lot of that version of Death Cab on this album.
Yeah, again, it's that return to form, and like nostalgia is a big theme that runs through this. And sometimes it's blatant and sometimes it's inferred. That's at least kind of the experience I had with it. And I honestly had a panic button moment. So if friend of the show Tanner is listening, he may get some encouragement out of this. But I had like a little existential crisis as a Death Cab guy where I went, I think I've lost my taste for Death Cab. Because the first 2 or 3 listens of this, I was like, I don't think I like it that much. It's not bad. It's just kind of bland. To quote Gordon Ramsay, it's bland. Yeah. It's fresh frozen. It just didn't get me fluffy. And I was like, oh no. Have I like retroactively lost my taste for Death Cab? And I voiced it to Tanner. I was like, it's like I used to hammer regular old Coca-Cola when I was younger. Loved it. And then just gradually lost my taste for it. I never drink it anymore.
Nope.
I'm a Diet Coke guy. I'm a mom.
Oh, DC's, baby.
DC,
like
D-sauce.
a gentleman. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yep. Like a mom in high-waisted jeans, baby. I am just chugging those fucks down. But at some point that shift occurs and I was like, oh, fuck. Did I age out of Death Cab for Cutie? That's embarrassing. But I'm happy to report that I didn't. I took a little skip through the field of gillyflowers that was transatlanticism and plans and rediscovered my love. And then after like listening to those and going to this, there was this comforting feeling where I still don't think it's the best Death Cab album, obviously, but it was a return to form and it felt comfortable finally.
Yes, because I'm telling you, that run they had from, you know, we have the facts for voting yes all the way through, like, basically for me, Codes and Keys. Like, that entire run of albums is some of the best work any band has ever done, in my opinion. And I mean, I can't wait till I'm driving up to Dallas next week to go see the Yankees play.
Oh.
I can't wait to listen to Transatlanticism in full on the way there, and probably another Death Cab album because it's like a 3.5-hour drive.
Yeah. Is girlfriend or fiance of the pod going?
No, she can't. Well, she probably doesn't care that much about going to see a baseball game, first of all, but it's also in the middle of the week, and she works a regular type hours job. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway.
So do you have any thoughts about Asphalt Meadows? Do we want to move right on to my last one?
I guess I just want to like shout out the lyrics for Asphalt Meadows because again, this is like the best that Death Cab has ever been in terms of like peak of the lyrical powers. And by that, I don't mean these alone are the best lyrics, but this is a representation of what the best of Death Cab lyrics look like. So verse 1, your kiss was a lonely prayer when you slipped it into my mouth. I closed my eyes and held it in, and then I exhaled it out. The glow of the downtown lights casting shadows across your face, as if all the buildings knew I could only know half of you. I mean, chef's kiss. That is evocative imagery. It's great. It's like very poetical. And set against a song that kind of has like the flavor of Modern Love by Bowie. It's just like a perfect combination. So this is an excellent distillation of like when Death Cab is at the peak of its powers.
Yes, and it honestly reminds me a lot of like Crooked Teeth. You know, the way that they, you know, I feel like he's loves maps first of all, loves maps, loves like cityscapes and skylines and like how those apply and relate or compare to other things in his life that he can like, you know, kind of make them seem like something they're not. Ben Gibbard loves that shit. Loves it. The Space Needle in Seattle is probably just rent-free in his head all the time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's no coincidence that it looks like a big pointy boner because that's probably what he does. He loves it like David Byrne loves songs about buildings and food, you know? This building has every convenience.
Big pointy boner.
Yeah. That's our band, Big Pointy Boner.
That's write it down. That's another one for the band names.
All right, writing it down.
There we go. Well, we'll get to my last pick from the album is Here to Forever. Now, this was the one, now I'm sure this is the one I did on the YouTube. So this to me was more like the Narrow Stairs, Codes and Keys era Death Cab. This seemed like much more in line with that than the previous to that. But I still loved it because I love those albums too. So this one to me, just the way that chorus, I want to know the measure, again, loves maps, like loves all that stuff from Here to Forever. And I want to feel the pressure of God or whatever. And it's just like such a Seattle, it's a very grunge lyric, like, and want to feel the pressure of God or whatever. Like it's just such an attitude to that. And I love it.
Yeah. You just can't really be bothered to finish the thought. You can't be bothered to finish articulating it because you're still having the thought.
Yeah.
This is supreme indie vibes. With a little sprinkle of The Cure on top. You close your eyes and it's like, it's again, peak Death Cab. And then I think for me, like lyrically, it's a very intriguing notion, which is this idea that like quality withstands the test of time and the ravages of death. Like great movies we still watch, forgettable ones we forget. So if you're a creator, there's a lot of pressure to make something like that. And especially as these guys approach 50, you know, they're all pushing 50 at this point, that becomes like that nostalgia factor becomes a little bit more of a specter on the edges of your mind. So it makes sense that you'd fall in love with old stuff because it's comforting and it withstood the test of time and it will hopefully inspire you to make something to that level. But then you get that like, whatever line, which indicates like, if you don't do it, you don't do it. But it's something nice to aspire to as a creative.
Yeah. And I feel like this, what I was most encouraged by on this album, just kind of overall, is just it really does sound like there's a lot of passion back into it. Like it has that same feeling that the previous albums did, the ones that, you know, that we listened to from back to front for years. And that's what I think I love most about it is that it feels like new Death Cab, but it feels so familiar at the same time. They did such a good job with that.
Yeah, snuggle on into it, you know?
Yes. Now, the one that I think is really a big change of pace song on this album is, we're going to get into it with your picks here. And the first one is Pepper.
Pepper was an interesting one for me. I mean that in a good way. Again, the idea is the most interesting part to me, which is that as you go through life, you experience so many things, you experience so many different emotions that inevitably you have to compartmentalize and you have to push out details that don't gel with your philosophy and the person you're trying to be, and like things that make you uncomfortable have to go. Keep owning what is meaningful to you. And you can argue whether or not that's a good or a bad thing. Like, I'm saving the bandwidth for only things that are positive and going to move me forward. Or by doing that, you forget these very formative experiences that's important to remember. Your mileage may vary. You tell me. But I love these lines. Again, the first verse, take a picture to remember this by. You'll never hold all the details in your mind. Filling your head with superfluous facts, push out what you're never getting back, and all that's left is a version of the truth, a recollection that is often misconstrued. This is my favorite part. Sergeant Pepper with the faces of friends, but the names I'll elude you in the end. And I like that because every one of us has looked at the cover of Sergeant Pepper and been like, I see Karl Marx, but I can't place this guy. Oh, there's Edgar Allan Poe, but I don't know who the fuck that is. And like that can often happen the more experiences you have, the less room you have. And it's that idea of like how much space do we have in our brains and what gets pushed out, what's important and what don't we need.
Think of the things that have been pushed out that might have ended up being important. Because how could you know?
Like math.
Yeah. Or does your brain just know, like, you're going to need this one later, we're going to stash that away and it'll come back up when we need it? Or does it just get rid of it? It's like, at one point, maybe I knew how to cure cancer. My brain's like, no, you don't need that one.
Yeah, you got to remember all the lyrics to your favorite Coheed song.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's priorities here.
And I like the idea, like, within that, there's an elegance to the idea, which is you hope to matter so much to somebody that they can't push you out of their brain.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that. And then it's met with this, like, very musically stripped back, restrained, and not holding back, but confident in how much it's putting out. The music is not trying to override the sentiment and the lyrics here. And I appreciate that, especially with something that's like a thinker like this one.
Yes. And this, I think, I don't know, I guess you could argue, but I think it's the most lyrically dense song. I mean, there's other songs that like feel like repeat themselves a lot more. This one was very much a narrative kind of song. It was a really, really just a nice, because like Here to Forever, very much like a pop rock, very much like that Smiths or Cure kind of vibe. But then you get into Pepper, and I feel like it's just gets more into that acoustic sort of feeling, that like early Death Cab, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I really, really liked about that one. So the next pick for you is I Miss Strangers. Now this one, if you didn't pick it, I was going to, because I think this one might throw the biggest curveball on the entire album.
Oh, you think so?
Yes.
Because I would say my last pick throws a big curveball too, but I totally see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
This one for me, first of all, immaculate Cure / Silver Sun pickups vibes on this one.
Yes.
They dipped into that bag a couple times on this album, and I didn't hate it.
Mm-hmm.
And I love all the contradictions in this song thematically, because it's essentially like wishing you could go back to times that were extremely painful, but at least they were a special kind of familiar. Like you knew how to operate within those painful times. It kept you striving towards something, and you knew how to work with that. But now you're in a place where there are kind of no surprises left, and this familiarity is suffocating. So there's an irony to that, where it's like you want what was familiar once, but you hate what's familiar now. But that's because what was familiar once had that flavor that comes with pain and struggling and transience, like never in one place for too long. It's always, there's something more satisfactory. Look, as two guys that are on the come up as YouTubers, right? Big
yeah,
deal
brother.
content creators.
Hell yeah, brother.
Savor this feeling of when we were coming up, because once we're there, once we're at like 2 million subscribers, it's not going to be the same.
No, it's going to go directly to my head. I'll tell you that too.
Oh, fuck yeah. And my wallet.
We're going to be insufferable.
Can't
You
wait.
thought it was bad already. It's only downhill from here.
To quote the great Bart Scott, can't wait.
Can't wait. But that bridge is why I call this one the biggest curveball on the album, because it was like straight up, it was creepy.
Yes.
Like looking at what the lyrics are, I mean, reach out to what is choking you. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's that like, oh, you wanted familiar then, but you don't now. It's like, you're indecisive about what you want. You're stuck in between is kind of what the idea is. And just the way that bridge is. And I think understanding what it actually means helps take a little of the creepiness away. But if you're just listening to the song for the first time and you weren't really paying attention, you hear all of a sudden, reach out to what is choking you, it's going to seem a little weird.
Like, oh, okay, Bad and Gibbard. And to kind of support that is that classic glum indie sound, that kind of like unsteady indie sound where it's like almost jello, right? It wiggles and waggles a little bit instead of like cutting directly through. It's a little fluid. It's hesitant by design. It doesn't want to stand out too much. It's driven and supported by the bass, because the bass is right on. that rhythm drives. It runs the race, but the guitar is like kind of riding on its shoulders, being like blap, 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 like shooting its shot in the moments where it counts with these little like glum outbursts that really contribute to that creepy feeling. It's quintessentially an indie guitar sound.
Yes, they did a lot of, and I think I heard a lot of The Cure.
Yes.
Just like with Mountain Goats, I heard a lot of REM through that whole thing. I feel like this album I did hear a lot of Death Cab influenced by Death Cab, but also Death Cab influenced by The Cure, because that guitar sound is very distinctive. And, there were other bands that did it, but obviously The Cure is the best one that did it. And I heard a lot of that, not only in Here to Forever, but also like in the songs. I think this one and the next one that you picked.
Yeah. And do you want to move on to that, or you got more to say about I Miss Strangers?
No, that was a good one. But this one I think is I don't know, I would say maybe the most exciting moment on the album.
I would agree. My first note says this felt like something different, which was extremely refreshing. It's the most experimental and weird that the music itself gets. It's kind of shoving the glossy indie pop vibes away, which is a bold choice at the end of an album that is, again, primarily a return to form for you, to then like spin off in a completely different direction right at the end. But it's still accessible, especially if you need those Death Cab indie pop vibes. It's not going to totally abandon them, but it is going to move in a completely different direction. And it was an instance where the buzzsaw distortion actually worked.
Yes. This one, it felt kind of heavy.
Yeah, yes.
At certain points. Like, this was almost a heavy rock song by Death Cab. Like, who knew?
Pretty good.
We haven't heard anything like this since like the early days of Death Cab, like way before even Plans.
Yeah, when it was angst as opposed to anxiety,
Yes. Yeah, that's a great distinction.
Thank you.
Actually, the difference between like Death Cab and Nirvana.
Angst and anxiety.
Yeah.
That's what we should rename this podcast, Angst and Anxiety. I love the choices that were made and the chances that were taken. It's like the weird dissonant tones and those little like minor chords, just those little flips out of nowhere that catch you off guard. This is one that like demanded active listening because it felt unstable. It felt like the song was melting down, which gave it this like strange epic quality that like made the song feel like it was stretching out. It gave the song like size and dimension and scope, and especially after that big instrumental break, it's like you're kind of sailing into this infinite void. It was a very cool trick of the music.
Yes, I feel like this was one where Ben Gibbard was like, we're just gonna fucking go. This is the last song on the album. We're just gonna let it rip.
Rip it. And again, I love when somebody can stick the landing. It's the same rule in music as it is in screenwriting. No matter what comes before, if you stick the last 10 or so minutes, you keep all the goodwill of the audience.
Yes, and I think they absolutely did on this one. And for me, like, obviously, this is a stream it. I mean, I thought this was way better than the previous few albums that they've had. I think since Codes and Keys, this is probably the best one they've come out with.
Yeah, what was the name of that one that came out before this that was kind of maligned? Thank You for Today?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people did not like that much.
And the one before that even too was not all that well received.
And I didn't hate Thank You for Today, but it was kind of one of those like, it's got its moments. And your mileage may vary with a return to form or consistency. I think it depends on the artist and the consumer. There are some people where I want what I want, like Silk Sonic, never change a fucking thing. Difficult to do because you're honoring a specific genre that had a definitive shelf life. But don't change a fucking thing. I love it. Billie Eilish doing something different, I'm like, good, you're young, try everything. But then you get certain people who are just like locked into these patterns, and you appreciate that. The Mountain Goats are very much locked into a formula, but it doesn't feel formulaic. Keeps delivering. So I think it depends on the person. And Death Cab has kind of like taken these little steps away from the paddock, but always end up coming back home. And that's what they did on this one. This was very familiar. And while it's not my favorite, it grew on me over subsequent listens, especially when I paired it with the good stuff, the old stuff. So I would say it's a stream it, especially if you're a Death Cab fan, in which case you probably don't need me to tell you to do it. And it's accessible enough for a new person. It's a good idea of what you can expect from Death Cab, so stream it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this one, I think I agree with you. It's not going to take the place of Transatlanticism or Photo Album or like Something About Airplanes or any of those albums. Those are all top tier, just chef's kiss, beautiful indie albums for me. But it does kind of go like alongside with them. I think those are really, really good examples of the best of Death Cab, and I think this one is a great entry point for people if you haven't got into them yet.
Yeah, jump in. It's a steamy, creamy Death Cab surprise.
And you can also find me talking about the song Here to Forever previously on our YouTube channel, where big things have been happening. Alex, we're almost at 800 subscribers as we record tonight.
We are getting perilously close to a big landmark, and that's like, to take away the haha funny kayfabe here, truthfully, when we hit 1,000 subscribers and a certain amount of watch hours, YouTube takes notice and they start to prioritize you, and you really can only grow from there. So this is kind of a BFD, y'all, a big fucking deal. So this is your opportunity to help us reach that benchmark. Let's get to 1,000 subscribers. You should be telling friends. You should be telling family. Does grandma have a YouTube? Make 3 fake ones under her name. People are worried about election fraud. Fuck that. You know what's more important? Scamming YouTube to give us subscribers and watch hours so that we can achieve our dreams of not having to work a 9 to 5. You can aspire to be us, but that only happens if you get your little rabbit ass over to the YouTube, youtube.com/C/out-on-that-line. Again, that address is youtube.com/C/out-on-that-line.
That was incredible.
Thank you.
Absolutely incredible. And I don't think there's anything else we can say to top that. Go check out all our videos. Tell us what you want to hear. And until next time.